Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. We are going to talk about how to use social media to dominate your niche and get more and more inbound leads. If you were a little bit early, we had Ralph, who's been a long time user of Recruiter talk about what 2023 was like. It wasn't easy for most people in the industry, and there is there is a there is a clear need for recruiters to have a better definition of their niche, have a better connection with their audience, and social media is a great way to do it. Joel has been doing it for a really long time, has a massive LinkedIn following, but I'll let Joel introduce himself.
Yeah, happy to be here with you guys. For any of you guys who don't know me, I've been in the recruitment space for about 10 years now, mainly on the agency side. Well, only on the agency side. And then just had a variety of positions. So I've done everything from sitting in just a recruiter seat, so kind of a split desk model, as well as running a full desk. I've also worked in just a sales capacity as well, and just a pure business development role. And so, over the last 10 years, I've seen a lot of flip-flops, right? Like, I think there's times where candidates seem to be the real challenge. The candidates always can be a challenge, right? The right candidates. But I think over the last 18 months, what I've experienced and seen from conversations and just even being in a sales position, it is getting harder and harder to build relationships with some of the more traditional outbound strategies that people have. I originally started building my brand online because I saw an opportunity to really leverage social media to just get awareness of who I am. And the whole point of that was I got a little bit sick of just the constant cycle of outbound, constantly DMing people, them not knowing who I was, constantly cold calling, and them not knowing who I was, constantly emailing. And it felt like every time I'd even make a new connection, people don't have time, and I'm having to pitch myself. And I just thought this is kind of a cyclical thing that's going on. And so about 4 years ago, I started really getting somewhat obsessed with the idea of building a brand. And since that point, I've built a big following, which I don't think is the key necessarily. I think a big following, the right big following, can be useful. But I've also tested what works, what doesn't. I've seen what consistently drives business and what doesn't drive business, what drives a lot of awareness, and what doesn't drive awareness. So I've just really kind of learned the ins and outs of social media, how the platforms work. And so I think for most agency owners, for most business owners, for most recruiters, I think there's elements of what I've learned over that time that can be useful. And then there's probably other things which I don't think everybody needs to get into, but it's really important that you figure out exactly what's going to help you and then what activities aren't. And I think that can be the confusing part for people when they're just starting out.
Fabulous. So help us understand how large is your following right now on different platforms.
Yeah, it's obviously always kind of growing and changing, but I've got about 220 something thousand followers on LinkedIn. TikTok, I'm at about 200,000 followers. YouTube, a couple of thousand subscribers, and then probably the rest of the platforms another 30 or 40,000 followers. So it's kind of distributed across platforms at this point.
I'm going to keep this conversation a little bit more focused on LinkedIn, because that's where recruiters tend to spend most of their time. So you mentioned a couple of things, right? Like, you experimented a long time over what works and what doesn't work. Can you help us double click on that? In your experience, what has worked, what hasn't really worked?
For me, what I see as being the biggest key to success is being consistent. And when I mean being consistent, it's the people who I've seen that have just seen results. What separated for people that don't see results is they've just stayed consistent for months, right? So I think that number one is the first key. I think what happens is people think that consistency to get results, it's like a month or 2 months. I think number one, you've got to develop a system that works for you and at least try and be consistent for 3 to 6 months. And then when I talk about consistency, I think you've got to aim nowadays for 3 to 5 times a week posting, and then engaging. And when I mean engaging, that's interacting with conversations in your niche for at least 20 to 30 minutes a day. And I think the other thing before that is you've got to shift your mindset and go, okay, this isn't an activity. This is a business development activity. That was like a big thing that shifted in my head. Like, a comment is just as valuable as a cold call. All right. And unless you truly believe that commenting, liking, and creating content is just as valuable as cold call or email, unless you make that shift, it's going to be hard to prioritize the time. So have that mind shift, and then create a system that you can be consistent with. Second thing, or I guess the other thing to keep in mind is, I think there's right now a culture, and I think that people like me don't help with this, by the way. I think there's a culture for recruiters on LinkedIn to create content for other recruiters. So you see this a lot, like, because it gets reactions. Like, I can post a meme, or I could post something about the recruitment industry, and I will get a lot of reactions because there's a lot of recruiters on LinkedIn. If you're trying to develop business, or you're trying to be known in a niche outside of recruiting, do not create content for other recruiters. So that's the other thing that I think don't just create content that's other recruiters are going to relate to. You really want to think, the engineers I'm reaching, the salespeople I'm reaching, the marketing people, what do they care about, and what's going to be helpful and valuable to them?
Makes sense. So you talked about memes. I see that you do a lot of reels, kind of very short skits. And so you have quite a wide variety of content that you have done, right? Like, so, and you mentioned earlier that there is some kind of content that is going to help you convert into business, and some won't, right? Like, can you help us understand that a little bit deeper, and why do you do all these different kind of content, even though you're just targeting people in the recruitment and HR industry?
I'll break it down. So I think where, for me, the memes came from and the joking came from was, it actually took me about 2 years to realize. I've been creating content for about 2 years, and I had somewhat of a following and would get good engagement. What I realized was, a lot of the leaders who I was trying to reach out to, they didn't know who I was. And so I just thought, okay, how can I get a lot of recruiters to engage on my content so I can get attention from their bosses, their people who are making decisions? And I think it's important to also remember, like, your content doesn't always have to sell, but your profile does. So sometimes the goal of your content is just to get people to your profile, and then your profile you can convert, right? So I want to also keep that in mind. So some of my memes are not really to sell people, right? It's to create awareness, create curiosity. Who is this guy? They go to my profile, and then if they have the need that my profile speaks to, then they'll want to work with me. They'll want to book a call. But when it comes to the content that converts and the content that doesn't, I would divide it out into content that creates awareness, and then content that converts. And with the content that converts, literally need to speak to a need that somebody has in the moment. So the content that converts the most typically won't get the most engagement, because not everybody's going to be dealing with the problem. May not even get really any engagement. But if you get 1 or 2 of those people who are having the problem that you're talking about and how you solve it, and it's valuable, that content will convert. And so I think you've got to differentiate between the two, and realize that it's okay to have a post that just creates awareness. Maybe it's funny, maybe it's like a joke type post, but you can't just double down on awareness. You got to have some of this other content that provides value and converts. It's just, most people get frustrated because the content that converts typically won't blow up like the content that creates awareness, right? Yeah. And so that's the way I think about it. And I also think then my big goal is, I think of like a funnel. We've all heard of like a funnel. I try and create a wide funnel, and I want to get awareness into my funnel, and then I'm trying to get people to my profile. And on my profile, I have a clear call to action. It's very clear. It just says "work with me," and people click on that and they book into my calendar. And then on my profile, I'm selling a lot more than with my content.
Now, if somebody is just getting started today, what would you suggest as an ideal mix, right? Like in terms of, hey, 70% of the content we should focus on awareness and 30% on, let's say, activation or acquisition, right? So, what do you think is the right mix, and how should you change that mix as you evolve?
Yeah, number one, what I would start to do before you even create any content, I think you've really got to think about the people that you're trying to reach specifically. So again, and this might be some work for some people, maybe for other people it's not that much work, but just think like, who am I actually trying to reach first? And then you need to think, what are the problems that they face, which a lot of time, I mean, we find this a lot, right? In business, like what's one of the first questions you ask? What problems are you having with your business? What are the struggles you're having? So you should be having a lot of those conversations. You should have an awareness of what your target market has a problem with and how you can fix that problem. So if you haven't identified that, number one, you need to identify that. And then that creates one of your content buckets. So for example, mine's pretty easy. I'll talk about, if you're not developing inbound leads, all right, I can talk about like what we're talking about right now, this type of content. It's going to be valuable for people who are looking to do that. For you though, if your target market is a high level talent leader, because they're the ones that make decisions of whether or not they can work with you, or if it's a business owner because you're working with smaller businesses, start to think about what are the problems that they talk to you regularly about. And you can assume that if one person is having that problem, there's probably other people you haven't talked to that are having a similar problem. So you think about that problem, think about the solution you provide, and you want to then just post that type of content once or twice a week. And I think it's not selling content, right? It's just valuable content. If you're struggling with this, try this. If you're struggling with that, try this other solution. So it should just be like really content that you would usually just do like verbally. If someone had that problem, what advice would you give to them? So that's one area. I think another area that you want to talk about is your wins and where you're successful. And I think this is where you kind of get the cringy content on LinkedIn, right? Where people will talk about their successes. And I think there's a line here, right? With this, you got to feel comfortable with this. And I think there's a way to do it and a way not to do it. But you've got to talk about your successful wins. So for example, if you're talking about Recruiterflow, you want to talk about what are some of the problems your clients have? How did you solve them? How did it help their business? If you're a recruiter, you talk about some of your placements that you've had recently. What's a tough search that you're on? How did you get past that search? How did you successfully find that candidate? And how did it impact their business? Now, I think where most people struggle with this is they don't want to talk about themselves and they feel like, oh my God, everyone's going to say, why are you talking about me like that? I think how you position it is you talk about how it helped that business, or you talk about the candidate and you do it in a celebratory way and make it about them rather than saying, hey, look at me. I just got, this month I got 5 placements and now I'm making a ton of money, right? There's a difference between the two. Yeah. But talk about those wins. I think this helps because it shows that you're successful. It shows that you're somebody that gets the job done, and that's who people want to work with. And then I would say the last type of content, which is helpful, is just stuff that's not related to work, that just is human. I call it just non-work related content, right? Or that's the type of content that you want to put out as well to connect with people. And I just think about phone calls you're on with anybody. You always build a rapport, and it's usually talking about your sports team, or it's talking about your hobbies or your podcast, kids and family. And again, you've got to know your level of what you want to put out there, but having that non-work related content allows you just to connect with people on a human to human level. And I think that's important in business development. It's important in recruiting. It's important in every aspect that we do, because we're in a human to human business.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, right? One of the things that I see, not just me, but a lot of other people struggle with, is it's difficult to put yourself out there. So they take the easy way out and just post a lot of this stuff from their company's LinkedIn page, right? Like not from their own personal page. I think it has that has its merits, but if you are just getting started, in your observation, right? Like, should you be posting from your company's page, which is not really a human or a face behind it, or should you be posting from your own personal profiles? There's a real human and person behind it. And if I know this correctly, also gets much better visibility. Is that correct?
I don't see a reason why you wouldn't post on both of those profiles. Because I know a lot of, like, I've got a business page right now. Granted, I do post a lot more like memes through that page, and that page has grown significantly. In fact, I get more views from that page than I do from my personal content. So, but people are always going to interact with humor, right? They're always going to interact with those things. But with that being said, because it's so competitive out there, I think whatever way that you can post more content, it's only going to help you. It's not going to hurt you. And it's what you'll find is just super competitive. So I think sometimes people go in there and they're like, oh wow, this is this guy's telling me to post 3 to 5 times a week. Most people who have established audience are posting 3 to 5 times a day on like 7 different platforms. So and those are the people you're competing against, and they know that it's competitive, so they put out a lot of content. So I think start with your personal page, but if you've got a blog, if you've got events that you're working on, if there's things that are going on in the business, talk about that too. And LinkedIn allows you to repost from your personal page. So one of the strategies I use is I will post something on my business page and then I'll repost it through my personal page to reach both of those audiences. I also think that yes, the personal page does, for the most part, get that visibility, but the business page can be set up too to where you can capture leads. So again, I don't see the reason why you wouldn't post from both. I also, if you do have a post that does really well on your personal page, you could probably, pretty much copy and paste that content and stick it through the business page. Even if you're a one person organization, you could do that. So I think why not? I also think, again, back to the original point, once you start valuing this stuff as much as cold calling, cold emailing, you start to think of it the same way. Like if I'm doing cold calling and someone comes up to me, or if I'm running a cold calling team or sales team and someone comes up to me and goes, oh, I did one cold call, you would never say, oh, that's enough. Try one a day for weeks. You'd say, no, you need to do more. And so just like any other type of business development, the more the better. And I think people are worried about like overwhelming the algorithm or overwhelming people's feeds. It's doubtful that that's going to happen because there's so much content out there, even on LinkedIn.
Yeah. What are some of the hacks that you would recommend to, find that early traction, find that early success?
I think when you're first starting out, and people talk about, a lot of content creators will talk about this. I think you've got to put out content, but I also think you have to engage with other people's content. And what I mean by engage with other people's content is you've almost got to find other people who are in your industry and, number one, like kind of piggyback on their audience. So let's say, for example, you're in sales. Find the sales influencers that are already getting a ton of traffic and a ton of visibility and start to comment on their posts. What I would say with that is, like, you still want it to be authentic, right? And you want to add value on those posts. So you don't want to just say like great post or something that doesn't add any value. You still want to add value to those conversations, but you kind of want to piggyback from their audience. Then you want to find people who are maybe in your space, who are in a similar situation as you, like they don't get a ton of engagement, and you want to start engaging with them. Because in social media in general, I found this time and time again, if you start engaging on other people's content, they start to engage on yours. So when you're first starting out, it is helpful to spend that time engaging on other people's content. And 99% of the time when I look at people's activity who don't have any engagement, they're not engaging on anyone else's content either. And so you kind of start to build like a little ecosystem, a little community. I'm not talking about an organized community. It's just more of an organic thing that happens. But I'd probably spend 20 to 30 minutes a day just commenting on other content within the space. And also, again, thinking about like every comment that I post. If you look down your newsfeed, your own newsfeed, you'll see posts that come up and it will say like Jim liked this post or Susan commented on this post. So every comment that you see actually gets seen by your network as well. So it's almost a way to show up again on the newsfeed without it just being your content. Does that make sense? So it's like the more you comment, the more visibility you even get for yourself, because you'll show up on other people's newsfeed, as well as piggybacking on their audience, and as well as like getting the opportunity for that person to then comment on your post, and then you extend your reach to their network. So I think that's a big piece of it, and it's worth spending time on that. Just for the record, you don't have to do that forever. I don't do as much commenting on other people's stuff now because I get a lot of my own engagement. But it will be said that I still will engage with other people because there's always value in that, supporting other people, right?
It's kind of like being a new kid at the school, not stressful at all, but I understand how you can build that organic community. Let's change gears a little bit and get a little bit technical, right? So what are the kind of metrics that you are tracking right now, or that you were tracking when you just got started, right? And I'm sure, right, like the basic metrics of engagement and all of that is fine, but in terms of time, right? Like if what I want to understand is, if I do this diligently over the next 3 months, what kind of metrics should I be expecting today? What should I be expecting 90 days down the road? What should I be expecting 180 days down the road? So can you help us understand a little bit more about that journey?
Yeah, why don't I start from where I'm at right now, like what I look at right now. The biggest indicator for me for whether or not my content is successful is how many people are booking on my calendar. So I mentioned, if you go to my profile, it says work with me. So that's what I'm tracking. Like that ultimately for me now is the biggest point. Like how many inbound leads am I attracting that are leading to sales conversations? And then obviously I'm looking at those sales conversations and how much revenue those generate. I'm 4 years into this journey though. Okay. So that's where you are 4 years from point. And I've probably been doing that the last 2 years. When I first started, number one metric I cared about was, how many connections am I adding? So I was very diligent with adding connections, adding the right connections. So again, don't add a bunch of other recruiters. That's probably not going to help. Add as many people as you can who are in your space, people you can recruit and people that you can work with, whatever your focus is and whatever like your pain point is in your business. I'm guessing for most people, it's prospects. You want to add those prospects. And again, I just met with a team yesterday and I said, you guys have 100 connections that you can make each week. I still make those 100 connections each week, even though I have inbound connections coming in. I've been diligent since day one, because you can never have too many prospects that you're reaching out to, right? So I'm always reaching out to new prospects, people I can reach. So I think that's a big metric. Like how much is your network growing? Then the next metric is like, how often am I showing up? Like how many posts am I making? How many comments? Start tracking that. Because a lot of times people will say, well, I'm not seeing the results. Well, how many posts did you make? Oh, I have no idea. I think a couple a week. Track the activity first. How many posts, how many comments, how much time. The next level is then impressions and followers. So as you start to produce content, you'll see an impression count. I wouldn't check that every day, but each month you want to see that increasing. If you're not seeing that increase, then you need to look at like, is my content resonating? Like what's going on here? And you do want to see that increase. And then once you're, at 3 to 6 months time period, I think that's when you start to look at how many people are coming to my profile and booking cold. How many people are going to my profile and going to my website? How many people are booking, going to my website and signing up for my email letter, right? That's when you start to track those types of metrics. So I think start with activity, quickly go into impressions based on your posts. And then when you feel comfortable and you've got a good system and you start to get that inbound, that's when you can really start tracking the leads. And an easy way to do this too is just ask people, like, hey, where did you find me? Right? It's hard to track some of this stuff, especially if you're not that sophisticated. If you don't have a HubSpot or you don't have like a tracking tool or someone in marketing, somebody's just asking people, where did you hear about me? Oh, I saw your post on LinkedIn. Great. It's starting to work. So that would be my thought with that.
So, how do you keep yourself organized? Any tools, any technologies that you have found very helpful, not just in terms of keeping you organized, but also generating ideas, generating content with AI? You might as well generate some content
Yeah.
with it, right? So what would you recommend?
Look, I think when you're first starting out, the number one most helpful tool is your Outlook calendar, right? Or whatever you're doing the schedule. And I mean, I still use this. I will block out engagement time, posting time, connection time. Like if I share my calendar with you right now, I have in my calendar every single day. And we're obviously talking about inbound. I'm going to talk a little bit about outbound with this as well, because it might surprise people. Maybe it doesn't surprise people, but I also do outbound activity as well, right? Because you don't want to just rely fully on inbound. You want to be doing outbound, right? I acknowledge that. So I have on my calendar every day, 6:30, I have 20 messages to new connections. And then I have 20 comments that I leave. So I do that every day, and that's just my business development. I get that out of the way first thing in the day. And I'm at the point now where most people who I know in my network, they have some familiarity with me. They've seen me, so I get a good response rate. Maybe you're not at that point, that's fine. But I've diarized that part or put it in the calendar. And then around 7:30, I have posting time. So I make sure that my posting time is like set away, that I have that, no call's going to get in the way. 7:30 in the morning, I post, and then I just block it off. So that half an hour, I can just engage with people who are commenting on my posts. I'm getting back to people, so it doesn't look like I'm just posting and then not responding to people. So I think that number one tool, use it, like block the time off, make it a priority. Otherwise, it's just not going to get done. Other tools that I found helpful is I do think like AI. I mean, when I started, there wasn't any kind of like, there wasn't really a Chat GPT or AI type thing. But what I could do is I could still scroll like even LinkedIn and just see what questions are people asking, what content seems to be doing well, and get inspiration that way. I just always used my notepad on my phone and just would note down new ideas. So it's pretty basic. I think nowadays what you could do is go to ChatGPT, have an idea of a couple posts, see what it generates. That gives you the framework for the post, and then you could edit it out, right? You could do that. I think we're seeing more and more people do that. But those are the big two for me. And I think as I got better and better at content, there's a couple of other tools that I use now, which I wouldn't suggest starting out. But some of the tools I use now, I use a tool called Repurpose.io, which literally every video I make, it sends it to 7 different platforms. So, when I make 4 videos a day on TikTok, right? We're not talking about TikTok. I make 4 videos a day, and then that goes out to YouTube, Snapchat, Twitter. It goes out to all these platforms. So I'm making 4 pieces of content that goes out to 28 different places. And then I also use other tools like CapCut to edit my videos. So the more you get into content, you probably want to pick up some more of those tech tools. But I say just start off with the calendar and a notepad to take ideas.
Yeah, keep things basic and simple. I like that. Now you touched upon something very interesting, right? And we have experienced that ourselves over here. We started doing outbound way back in 2020. And we still do, of course, right? Like at Recruiter Flow, we still do it. We are big believers in it. And today, because we have a much better brand recognition, a lot of people would have heard about us, but they wouldn't exactly know. They definitely would have heard about us. Our response rates have done much better as we do more brand building. What has your journey, and that is purely from Recruiter Flow, because it's not me reaching out, it's our BDR team that's reaching out,
Right.
and they say that BDR at Recruiter Flow and yada yada yada. What has your journey been, right? Like before you started doing anything in terms of your personal brand, and after your personal brand, what has been the kind of shift that you have seen in response rates?
Yeah, look, I mean, I touched upon it before, but the more people know you, the more calls you get booked. It's just I don't, it's kind of like, I hate to like make it that simple, but it's just true. And I think one of my I'm pretty sure someone I know really, really well that I used to work with posted about this the other day. It's like, if a celebrity reached out to you, you would respond. If it just doesn't,
Yeah.
it like, Justin Bieber reaches out to you and it's like, I want to chat, you're probably going to respond. And so obviously you're not going to get to that level. I'm not saying like you got to be like a celebrity, but it's this whole idea of, um, there's almost levels to cold call, right? So when I reach out to people, I'm still doing cold outbound because I don't actually know them, but it's warm in the sense that they know me. So that increased the response rates. What also increased the response rates even more was having something I could offer people. And what I offer people is, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast, for example. Okay, I say I'd love to get you on my podcast, just in case you didn't know. I got a couple 100,000 followers on social media. And so it's almost given that, oh, you want me to be on your podcast? I'll have the conversation with you. Right. Now, if you're just building, you're not going to be on that level. But I think it's still important to go, what can I offer this person? Is there something I can offer them? And is there something of value? And I think if you can pinpoint that, if you have something that's actually valuable to people, and I think again, as you build your audience, that audience can be valuable people who don't have an audience, right? Because it's hard. It can be hard work to build an audience. So, and again, I've been doing this a long time, so I think it takes a while to get to that point. But 3 to 6 months, if you're getting good engagement and you've put the work in, there's a good chance a lot of your prospects haven't put that work in, and then you're able to bring them into your ecosystem and say, maybe it's a podcast. I don't know. Maybe it's a blog you're going to feature them in. Maybe it's something else. But I think having that value add, that means my response rates, I would say, to anybody I reach out to at this point, are 60 to 70% like response rate. And it's always the same thing. Like, oh yeah, I've seen your stuff. Doesn't mean they're like my number one follower, but they've seen the stuff, right? And I think that's the point. It's like, how do you become that? How do you become an interesting person in your industry? How do you have something of value? That's been huge. So I don't know if you've seen that same thing as well.
Yeah, we definitely have, right? Like, and in marketing, we try and measure what is your exposure frequency, right? Like, especially in B2C marketing, but some of these concepts apply on B2B as well, where one of the main tricks is how frequently are you, does a consumer see you, right? Like just your brand color, in whatever different shape and form, right? Like, and repeated exposure is what breeds familiarity, and that's what, so once you are in that store aisle and you want soda, you remember, hey, soda, Coca-Cola, right? So the
Exactly.
brain makes that connection, right? So
And it's interesting to note too. I think you name these big brands. Here's the point, and I think this is where it gets really hard for people. And like, there's no like real secret with this stuff. Like think about Pepsi or think about Coke. Like, why do you know those brands? It's because man, they probably spent billions on advertising. It's not like they got to a point and went, I think everyone knows this, we'll stop. They got a big advertising budget. So I think that's the other thing. I think the mindset you just have to shift of like, either you believe in this stuff and you're going to be consistent with it and you're going to value it and you're going to stick with it. And then if you don't, I think then your life is just you're harder because you're constantly going to have to come up with ways to make these new connections that's with sales activities, right? So, and I think that for some people that's okay if you don't think that content's a viable way to generate business. Like I would say like the people I talk to the most, I think if you're somebody who is looking to exit the industry within the next 3 years, I don't know whether I would spend a ton of time on this stuff. But if you're looking at like 5, 10, 15 years from now, you just have to ask yourself, like, do I think that this social media, for example, do I think this is going away? Right. And I think when we honestly talk to ourselves, because I've been talking about this for 4 years, when we honestly talk about it, it's like it's not going away. It just seems to be more and more and more. And like look at kids. Kids are using this stuff more and more. And so I think that, that's the mindset you have to have, right? And understand it's competitive out there. It's competitive for attention. And so I think you have to commit to it. And that's the biggest thing I've seen is it's kind of boring showing up every day. Like it wasn't for 6 months, it wasn't really exciting to me, and it was hard work. And so you just have to ask yourself, like, is it worth putting in that work? And equally, like you could put your work into something else, right? Maybe you want to cold call 500 times a day. Great. It's like pick your hard work out of it.
I don't think I have any more questions for Joel. So guys, if you have any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom.
What's the number one advice for recruiters who have not been using social media to find business in the past? Look, the number one advice is number one, flip your thinking. Social media is a valuable tool to develop this business. Number two, start to just get active on social media, comment, get involved in the conversations. And then number three, that's when you start to produce the content like what we've been talking about. So I think there was a time I had not done any of this, right? I'm talking 4 years ago. I wasn't even on social media. LinkedIn was the only thing I'm on. And over time, I took the time and I worked hard at it, right? And this is the part where I lose people because they see a lot of jokes and they see a lot of memes, but this is hard work. And maybe you go, you know what? I prefer my hard work to be cold emails and whatever.
Adrian also asks, has anyone had any success with Facebook ads to market?
I know a decent amount of people who have had success with Facebook ads, like in healthcare, for example. I think it's gotten harder because of different regulations. From my understanding, I think Facebook actually cracked down on that. What I would think about with that is, again, it's like trying to figure out like where people are, what their mindsets on where they are as well, right? So if like someone's on Facebook, are they looking for a job or are they just looking for updates on their family? So I would think if you're going to take a paid ad approach, I don't know. I think if you just put job ads out there, I mean, job ads aren't as effective, right? It's maybe get a little bit more creative with the content. Is there something you can do that's going to keep people engaged? That's my thought. Manan, what are your thoughts with that?
The ads are, you are paying Facebook, you're paying Instagram to rent their audience, right? So it can be a short-term hack, a short-term solution. But you want to be very, very careful about how if you do decide to run ads, right? Like, of course, it's so much better for you to just, have a very organic reach. But if you do decide to run ads, they serve a purpose. Make sure whether, you want to do it on Facebook, whether you want to do it on Instagram, because these are two separate audiences, very different mechanisms, very different conversion rates, very different ad forms as well. So what clicks and works on Facebook probably won't really work on Instagram and vice versa. That is number one. And number two is you want to be very conscious of the money that you spend. So if you put a daily budget of $100 on Facebook, Facebook will spend that budget no matter what you do, right? So, and in return, if you have not set up your campaign correctly, you will get basically zero good applicants, right? So the problem is that it takes some time and investment for you to learn Facebook or Google or any of these ad algorithms and how they work, and vice versa. It takes that much amount of time and money for these algorithms to understand, what's the audience that resonates with your ads, right? So if you're ready to put in that investment of money, time, effort, people, then go ahead, do it. It's a great way for you to, kind of very rapidly build traction, very rapidly, generate leads. In the long run, so you're just renting the audience instead of owning the audience. That's what Joel is trying to say. So longer run, it's so much better to own your own audience, but it takes time and effort to build that. I hope that
I think you're right.
question.
And you also said too, something important too, is like, if you can't, here's what I would, if you're not doing it organically right now and seeing success, I'd be hesitant on running Facebook ads. And then the other thing to just keep in mind is, like, I think with recruiting, like, you're always limited to, like, there's external factors that are outside of your control. For example, like, you're looking to fill a job, there's a lot of other things that go into the job than just reaching somebody, right? Like, timing's got to be right. You got to have a good job that people are actually interested in. So, I think Facebook ads are great for like, if you're selling to like consumers like t-shirts, right? Because it's like easy, it's a click. Oh, but it's like, even just look at Indeed, right? It's like when people go there, like you don't get great responses from job ads all the time. So, um, the biggest successes I've heard are like within healthcare, and like even the person who was asking about like trades jobs, that could be a decent one, like manufacturing hourly jobs, just because those people are really hard to reach on LinkedIn as well. Um, Someone just said, what are your suggestions for using connection requests to a target buyer to get more connects or responses? Nick, I don't put any personal messages when I'm connecting with people, because I know it's a long time. What I think happens is, number one, I think it's harder to connect with people now on LinkedIn, because they know they're going to get spammed. So we can all thank AI for this, because I think AI has made it easier to spam people. And this is where I would think, like, think about your brand, right? It's like what we're talking about. If Justin Bieber reaches out to you to send you a connection request, you're gonna be like, I love his stuff. I'm gonna connect with him. The guy that you have no idea about reaches out to you, and then you look at the page, it's like, oh, it's a recruiter. You're instinctively gonna think, as soon as I connect with this recruiter, they're gonna spam me. So I don't know if there is a best message. I think you've got to do like A/B testing on it and go, okay, hey, 1 week I'm going to send out 100 requests with this message, or I'm going to send out 20 requests with this message and 20 requests with that message, and see which one resonates more with people, and then maybe try it without the messages. But I think with a lot of this, like, it's going to depend on your market. It's going to depend on the type of people you're reaching out to. But in general, one of the challenges with LinkedIn, the outbound, is that there's just so many bad DMs out there. And there's a lot of tools that are automating this stuff that's not helping anything. Right. And so I think about this with like outbound emails. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing sequences. Everybody's doing 8-stage, email, phone call, email. Everyone's doing that. Okay. Now you got to think, like, how can I show up in someone's inbox to where they're like, I recognize this person? It's going to give you an edge without a doubt. And so this is where the content comes into it. So
Yeah.
I don't know, test it. And then someone else asked about like what forms of content do you
Just
recommend? Oh yeah.
one thing to add there, Nick. We actually did test that. What we found, we our sales team gets and we connect with people like you, recruiters on LinkedIn. Our sales team finds the best connection rates when they don't put any message, right? So whatever the default LinkedIn is, because if you put a message, you know that
I
you're going to
know.
get pitched
You
in next
know.
7 days, right? So people are just too used to it. So that's what has
Unless you
worked for
genuinely know
us.
the person. Like if you met him, right? Like if we
Oh
met
yeah,
somewhere,
for sure.
right? And it's like, hey, I met you and you had a good connection. I think personal message, right? But it's like if your personal message is going to be like, hey, Joel, we're in the same industry. Figured we would connect. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, that doesn't even seem personalized, right? It's like the
yeah.
opposite of a personalized message. Anyway, you can see like I'm super into this stuff. Thanks a million. What forms of content do I recommend for LinkedIn? Short versus long, video versus text versus pictures. Um, about starting out, I would go with written posts, because I think across social media, and guys, even on like TikTok, right, which is a video platform, I leverage text so much, because if you noticed on TikTok, if you go to my TikTok, every video, it has text. So what I've gotten really good at is going, it's not just about the verbal hook, it's about the written hook. Like writing is so important. Like the better you can be at a writer, it's going to help you with your emails. It's going to help you with your emails. It's going to help you on social media. So like get good at writing first, like writing for sure. And then I lean more towards short content when you're first starting, because you think like, and people use this example all the time. They go, well, Joe Rogan has a 3-hour podcast. Well, Joe Rogan's Joe Rogan. Okay. If you didn't know Joe Rogan and his podcast, no, you wouldn't tune in for 3 hours. So you got to think about that as well. Like when you start and people don't know you, you kind of have to earn the trust. So I lean with like shorter written posts to the point. I think images can help, but again, think about the people that you're interacting with. Do they value pictures? Like what kind of images do they value? And so I think with all of this stuff, you got to know your audience and who you're trying to reach. You got to know what they're going to respond to. And if you don't know, maybe you test it. But I think written first, maybe some text. And I think with video, video should be the goal of where you want to get to. Because without a doubt, video content, and I used to not think this, but video content is the way that you connect with people. Like there's something about video. Like, and I think about this, like if you saw a post that's written, you might be able to engage with it quickly, great, 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 and like it. But with a video, once you get past that 3 or 4 seconds, it's the next thing, next closest thing you have to like a one-on-one interaction with someone in real life. It's something about video. And I noticed this when I got on TikTok. My TikTok followers who like have followed me for a while, they are like, man, I really feel like I know you. Like I know it. And you're exactly the same offline that you are online. I never used to get that. Even though I had 100,000 followers, even when I'm sharing these memes, I might get good reactions, but I don't have like that depth of relationship. So I think video should be the goal to get to. I just think you have to master writing before you even know like what's going to hook people. Because you got to be able to write scripts on video and understand like how to speak clearly, how to not use ums and ahs, how to not lose people, how to be engaging. And I think that takes time, and you've got to understand writing before that. So that would be my thought with that.
Yeah, and as it stands today, LinkedIn algorithm really, really loves videos, right? So if you post a video against, as opposed to text, you will get a little bit extra edge in terms of distribution just from the algorithm.
Thoughts on candidate-led marketing, basically. Yeah, so like the MPC. Look, I've never been a fan of MPC because I've always sold on like, I want to have an intake meeting with you first. So I'm not huge on the candidate-led marketing, but I think where the closest I would get to candidate-led marketing is what I talked about at the beginning, where you're talking about like your wins, right? So if you had a really long search for a CFO, you could maybe do a post about that, and then you're signaling to the market, hey, I place CFOs, and then if they have that need, they might trigger in them like, oh wow, like you place people like that. I know people love the MPC technique, and I think if it works for you, great. But you've also like when I meet with clients, I'm like, hey, I want to find you the right candidate that's going to match your culture. And for me to do that, I'm going to have to sit down and learn about your company. So that's why I don't love the MPC marketing technique. But I think for some people, like if they have an urgent need and you're like, hey, I got this candidate, and you black it out and they're like, hey, awesome, we need that exact person, and it opens a conversation. It obviously it could work, right? But I think depending on how you're marketing yourself, like I think you could potentially shoot yourself in the foot with that. But with that being said, I know a lot of people are really successful with that. So that's my thought on like MPCing. And I know it's really popular as well. With
Yeah,
it's a big training
yeah. I
tool.
mean, if as a tactic it works for you, that's great. It's very popular. I see it across a lot of our customers. In fact, we are coming up with a feature just for better managing MPCs in Recruiter Flow.
So I'd love to learn more about that because I could potentially use it. So I'm open to that.
I'll show you once it's out. Perfect. So I don't think you have any more questions. Well, Joel, thank you so much for giving us your time. If you're still here, we will process this and send over the recording sometime mid next week. Thank you so much for attending, and have a fabulous day ahead. Making it till the end of the video, trust me, you're one in 1,000. So if you really like the content, please give us a like or subscribe, and we will put a link to Joel's LinkedIn in the description of this video. He posts great content about recruiting. Do give him a follow as well. And if you have any ideas, if you want any topics for us to cover, do write to us in the comments. Thank you so much.